Plenty of two-wheel action coming up all throughout the season. 1999 should be a ripper. World Motorcycle Championships, Channel 10 covering them all. Right at the moment, they've got some fantastic historic Formula One cars out on the streets of Adelaide. And leading them around, Vern Schuppan, one of our most experienced and successful international Australian drivers. Wonderful variety of cars and drivers.
Rob Lamslow in there as well. Pete Lovely on pole position, and that sensational Lotus 49B Cosworth. Car number 25, Schuppan alongside. Then Sir Jack Brabham from row 2 with Rob's Lamplow in the BRM V12. Mike Rives in the Brabham Climax. Then Peter Sims, Pip Stillwell, and Ian Pugh from row 8.
Out of row 5, Dave Livingston in that beautiful Ferrari V12. Malcolm Ricketts in the Lotus 32B. And Rick Hall will start off the back in another Brabham. 8 laps the distance, and wonderful. This is race 4 of 4, held at this wonderful track over the weekend. And some of the punters I've been talking to over the weekend just saying, aren't these glorious things to look at? And
absolutely sensational to listen to as well.
Roulettes have been over the skies, of course, all weekend. Always putting on a wonderful display. And you want an indication of precision and skill. There it is on screen now, flying just meters apart. Enormous speeds, really entertaining the crowds overhead. Have too the Army choppers. We've had the US Air Force flying over in fighter jets. We've had everything falling out of the sky this weekend. And the action's been just as thick in the sky as it has been on the track. It's been a wonderful weekend, and Adelaide has really turned it on.
Back to 10 cars for this race, Mark. In fact, we lost the Ferrari 312 V12 of Dave Livingston, who actually won a race here yesterday. In the earlier race today, of all things, the sump plug fell out of the car. Dropped a heap of oil everywhere, caused an enormous amount of chaos. Interestingly enough, an official found the sump plug, handed it to Sir Jack Brabham, who then brought it back to the pit area. They put it back in the car, loaded it back up with oil, but unfortunately there's some kind of terminal engine noise in there. So unfortunately the superb Livingston Ferrari is scratching from this race.
Well, that's a shame. But have seen it in action all weekend. It's been a wonderful addition to the program. But it is tough for these guys. A lot of these cars built in the mid to late 1960s, they're getting pretty old. Some of them are quite temperamental. And it's a credit to the mechanics and engineers who keep these cars not only running well, but looking so pristine.
And it's such a glamorous era of Formula One too. I mean, this was the era before aerodynamics, before wings. In fact, you're looking at sort of 30 years ago, and the cars here sort of 68, 67, 68, 69. The winged era really started 1970, towards the end of 69. You remember those big, high, long wings they set over the rear end of these cars? So this was really the last of the, I guess, the true Formula racing cars.
Well, they're just wonderfully simple things, aren't they? I was looking at a few of them, the Lotus 49Bs in the pits over the weekend, and honestly, a modern Formula Ford car is technically more advanced than these in terms of their suspension design and the development. These cars were very, very simple. Put a great importance on driver input. Green flag, waving. This isn't just a demonstration, ladies and gentlemen. This is an actual race, and these guys were getting stuck into it all weekend. We get the green, and a great start from Sir Jack Brabham up the second row. He's left the pole man, Pete Lovely, standing. Vern Schuppan had a problem too.
In fact, I think we may have lost one of the classic Team Lotus cars on the warm-up lap, so bad news.
Saw Schuppan limping around. Was that him back there? Yeah, he's a bit further back in the order, but they have had some problems with those two Lotus cars on the grid. So it's Sir Jack Brabham, Australia's 3-time World Formula One champion, returning to his roots. And what a wonderful sight as Black Jack leads this big field around.
He'd be so happy because he actually started from the back of the grid in the earlier race today, drove through to third outright, said, look, I think I can go 1 or 2 better. 73 years of age, loves his motorsport, was sliding the car around. It was just beautiful to watch.
He's an amazing man. He is very hard of hearing these days because, of course, he was driving cars back in the era when no one thought about gear protection. And Jack, being very much an engineer and a mechanic himself, was always involved with tuning engines, running engines on dynamometers. He was always having his ears exposed to the extremely loud noises that these cars give off, and he's paid the price these days.
And just to watch him too in the superb McLaren. They claim it's the first car that Bruce McLaren ever built, and of course McLaren's still one of only 2 of these names now in Formula One, the reigning Formula One world champions, of course. David Coulthard, Mika Hakkinen still driving for the McLaren team. Rob Lamslow in there too, chasing him down hard. He's also been very fast this weekend. He's racing the BRMP 133 all the way from UK.
Yeah, and these guys really love to race too. Rob's Formula 2 and Formula 3 driver back in the 1960s and became a very prominent race car dealer back then too. Also driven in many non-championship Formula One races in BRMs, and has lately become a very prominent historic racer and collector. These guys just love their motorsport, and you won't find any sponsor signage stuck all over these cars. They race around the world. They really are very much from the paint jobs that they wore in their heyday.
So Jack retired from Grand Prix racing in 1970 at 44 years of age, and in those days, of course, was still quite young to be in Formula One.
Well, it was amazing, wasn't it? Like everyone said, Jack was always famous for saying it's best to win a race at the slowest possible speed, so people thought he wasn't a real charger. But I remember that, like 44 years of age, I think it was his last year in the World Championship, had a tremendous battle with Jochen Rindt at Monaco, and he was every bit as fast in his retirement years. A fabulous driver.
And of course, in 1966, won his world title as well for the third time in the Repco Brabham, the first Australian designed, owned and engineered car by a driver. And in 1967, the title went to his teammate Denny Holm.
Well, it looks like Vern Schuppan now, after those problems on the grid. There he is in the Lotus 49 with the gold top on his helmet. Car 49 leading his teammate Pete Lovely from the United States. And look at those cars, just poetry in motion. Lotus 49, a very significant car in Formula One history. It was in fact the car built by Colin Chapman of Lotus to take Ford's DFV engine. Beautiful quad cam 3-litre V8 developed by Ford and Cosworth Engineering, and it went on to be one of the most successful engines in the history of Grand Prix racing.
And indeed in other forms of motor racing too. Even the BDA Escorts carry the Cosworth name right through, and it's still a very, very famous mark and a very competitive mark in motor racing.
Car 7, the beautiful little Brabham BT 11A, just getting overtaken by the two Lotus cars. Beautiful little yellow machine. That's in fact the car Kevin Bartlett drove at Bathurst to set the first 100-mile-per-hour lap average many years ago. Also driven by Frank Gardner in the Tasman Series too, so it was a Brabham that was brought to Australia for both Gardner and Kevin Bartlett to drive for the Alec Mildred team, a very famous team in Australian open-wheel racing back, of course, in the 60s. It's just amazing. These cars end up in garages and barns all over the country. Mike Rives, in fact, found the rolling chassis back in 1997, looking in a pretty dilapidated state. Finally restored the car back to its original condition after a 10-year restoration. And actually, Kevin Bartlett recently drove this car at Oran Park, and it was a wonderful day. And of course, the value of these cars absolutely sky high at the moment, particularly cars like the lovely car, the Schuppan car running up the front as well, Sir Jack Brabham's McLaren. Really, you can't put a value on them. And look at this car 11 that just went out of screen. This car with the big orange mouth on it. What an exotic thing. The BRM P115 H16. H16 meaning the engine is an H16 configuration. Basically two 8-cylinder engines stacked on top of each other. An incredibly complicated device. Let's have a look how they're running at the moment. Pete Lovely and Vern Schuppan in the Lotus is out front. So Jack Brabham, he's been taken. Rob Slamplow, Mike Rives, Peter Sims, Biff Stillwell and Ian Pugh. We've got plenty more coming up after the break. As the race legends Welcome back to the streets of Adelaide, and we've got a fantastic race on here between Jack Brabham in the McLaren and the two Lotus Fords of Vern Schuppan and Pete Lovely from the United States. And Jack Brabham, you can just imagine the adrenaline pumping through the 73-year-old. He is doing a magnificent job in the lead of this field. In fact, Schuppan's a young man in this trio, because Pete Lovely's celebrating his 73rd birthday today. Jack Brabham became 73 on the 2nd of April, so Schuppan's the rookie in the middle of the two grandfathers. A young whippersnapper in second position. So fantastic racing. As we said at the beginning, these blokes don't muck around. This is a real motor race. Jack Brabham defending his territory, shifting back through the gears on the McLaren. Vern Schuppan in second position, car 49. The beautifully turned out gold leaf Lotus 49B. Pete Lovely in the sister car behind him. Let's have a look at this on the replay. The move in the break. In fact, one on the side. You'll see that Lampslow, who was running, I think, third or second outright at the stage, has got wrapped up by both the Lotuses. Yep. And been pushed back in car 46. I think he was sitting in a pretty confident position there in second position, just behind Jack. Both Schuppan and Lovely came through. Now Lovely, I think, starting to put a bit of pressure on his teammate Schuppan. 2 laps to go. Boy, oh boy. Streets are alive with the historic races at Adelaide. Sensational 500, the V8 still to come, but this is a fantastic scene setup.
Well, of
Jack,
course, Bruce McLaren was one of the first mechanics that ever worked for Sir Jack Brabham years ago, so it's quite fitting that Sir Jack is driving one of Bruce's cars now.
tell you what, they're getting stuck into it. This is like the good old days at the slipstreaming duels with Jimmy Clark and Graham Hill and the Lotuses. Fantastic side.
So Jack was asked yesterday, what's it like driving the McLaren? He said, well, they were no bloody good in 1968. They're not much better now. They're nowhere near as good as my Brabhams.
Yeah, he would have wanted to be in his Brabham around the streets of Adelaide, but he's making a fist of it here. Great drive. Pete Lovely in third position. Lamslau drops back to fourth in the BRM. Another BRM, big challenge down the inside. Vern Schuppan really opens the throttle on the 3-litre DFV. Pete Lovely goes with him, so Jack Brabham gives him away. Thanks, Jack. So it's Lotus 1-2. McLaren of Sir Jack Brabham drops back to third position.
Well, Lovely's had an earlier win today, so maybe he's going to make it 2 out of 2 today for this superb classic team, Lotus, the only real factory team, I guess you could say, in historic Formula One racing. It's now run by Clive Chapman, son of Colin Chapman, who of course pioneered Lotus and was killed in a plane crash. And basically Clive has now set up a complete workshop, has all the original drawings for these cars, run out of the family mansion at Ketteringham in Norfolk in the UK, and has turned out this superb 2-car classic Lotus team that now really travels the world racing in historic Formula One racing.
What's really interesting, look at that car 25, Pete Lovely's car. 1 lap to go for our race leader. Pete actually bought that car back in 1969 to run in the North American Formula One races. Now, he believed at the time that it was an ex-Graham Hill Mario Andretti chassis, but it's recently been revealed that this is actually the first Ford Cosworth 49 that Jim Clark used to win the 1967 Dutch Grand Prix and gave the Ford DFV engine its debut victory. It's an incredibly important car in history.
Well, they built two. They built R1 and R2, or chassis R1 and R2. Graham Hill wrecked R1. R2 became the Jim Clark car, which was later on again rebuilt as chassis R5. So that's the chassis that you're watching now, which was sold by Colin Chapman to Pete Lovely, who raced it in the North American rounds of the Formula One World Championship as a privateer.
Well, he really was a very respected Lotus driver back in the 1950s. And these guys, a lot of experience. Pete Lovely, though, is coming side by side alongside his teammate Vern Schuppan. No, just tucks in behind. It's a very tight little chicane down the back straight here as they swing on to Brabham straight down toward the hairpin for the final time. Vern Schuppan getting his mirrors full of another Gold Leaf Lotus 49. Jack Brabham sitting back there in third position, had no answer to the Lotus onslaught.
3-litre cars, of course, for this sensational era of 3-litre Formula One racing. Also, we have some 2.5-litre cars that raced in the Australia, New Zealand, Tasman series. Also running here at Adelaide today. But Schuppan, very, very accomplished, particularly in sports cars, endurance racing in his career. He did race in Formula One. He's raced at Indianapolis, still lives in Indianapolis, and won Le Mans for Porsche in 1983.
Well, we're heading up to a formation finish. Gold Leaf Team Lotus. Vern Schuppan, Pete Lovely, they're going to go side by side toward the line. Schuppan doesn't want to let his teammate in, though. Formation finish, 1-2 across the line. The crowd very much appreciative. Jack Brabham takes third position, 73 years of age. What a wonderful effort from the elder statesman of motorsport.
Yes, a tremendous performance. Rob's Lamslau, or Lamplau, I should say, will come in car 46. Fourth outright. Hall will finish fifth. And then Rives in the beautiful little yellow. Brabham, sixth outright.
Well, it really is a credit to the teams that have come out here and competed on the streets of Adelaide. I'm sure this is just the thin edge of the wedge. I'm sure there'll be a lot more cars coming here as word spreads of what a wonderful meeting Adelaide has put on.
Yes, it would be great to see this category really build into something over the next few years, Mark, because the crowd loves it, the drivers love it, the cars look sensational, and it's very much a fitting complement to the rest of the program here.
And don't they sound fabulous?
Yes, they're just absolutely fantastic with those treaded tyres. They raced on so successfully in the 60s, of course.
So the crowd there standing in appreciation, waving to the drivers. It's been a wonderful performance. Jack Brabham still loves getting back inside a car. Tremendous race driver, 3 times world champion, Australia's first Formula One world champion. Vern Schuppan it was, though, who won the race from Pete Lovely, his teammate. So Jack Brabham, wonderful effort to come in third. Robs Lamplau in the BRM V12 in fourth. Mike Rives in the Brabham in fifth. Rick Hall in sixth. Malcolm Ricketts in the little Lotus 32B in seventh. And rounding out the 8, Peter Sims in the Brabham BT23.